This is a CBC podcast.
Support for the delivery of this podcast is brought to you by Canada Savings Bonds. Available until December 1st. What are you saving for?
Hi there, and welcome to part 2 of the current podcast. I'm Tom Harrington. Last week, Canada's Privacy Commissioner reported that officials at Veterans Affairs had passed around thousands of pages of confidential medical records and financial statements. They were seen by mid-level managers all the way up to the minister. They belonged to Sean Brouillet, a Canadian veteran and a vocal critic of the department. And he told us on The Current that he believes the goal was to use the information to discredit him, and he alleges much worse.
Plan was that they were going to force me into their hospital. There's only one hospital that Veterans Affairs has. It's in Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue in Montreal. And they were going to force me into the psychiatric assessment in that clinic. But the plan was even more insidious than that. It wasn't that I was going to go and show up for a couple hours, but they planned on putting me in there in a week or more on an inpatient setting. I mean, this terrified me. And if I did not agree, the plan was to cut off all my treatment.
The Privacy Commissioner found the actions of public officials alarming. Sean Brouillet found them unconscionable, but it is their inaction that troubles Amir Attaran. He's a law professor at the University of Ottawa, and he's especially concerned about the fact that this behavior went on for years, reportedly involving hundreds of bureaucrats, and that not a word of it was leaked to the public by anyone. Amir Attaran is in Ottawa this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Tom.
Well, what do you think of that someone in the Department of Veterans Affairs, or any other department for that matter, faced with this sort of a misbehavior? What should they have done?
Well, there's a point at which you have to say what's being done is wrong. And certainly leaking a person's medical file to the minister and your colleagues when you're not meant to have it, that's something that belongs in the hands of those giving him care. Medical files aren't supposed to be handled by bureaucrats. At some point, you have to say that's wrong, and you have to put an end to it. And putting an end to it means informing others that it's happening, essentially leaking the fact that it's happening.
What other options, though, might there be other than leaking to raise the alarm?
Well, there are really two options in law. There's the Public Service Disclosure Protection Act. That's a mouthful. But what it is a law that allows public servants, when they are aware of wrongdoing, like fiscal mismanagement or the breaking of the law, and in Brouillet's case, the law was broken, to disclose that fact to their superiors, and to do so in a protected way. The law does not allow the government to take retribution on the person doing this. Now, in practice, you can well imagine the government hates that law, and they don't really protect whistleblowers in the way that I think they ought to. So the other option is, of course, to go see a lawyer and let the lawyer handle this for you. Because anything you pass to a lawyer is protected by solicitor-client privilege. That's the most airtight privilege in the law. You can let a lawyer be your conduit, and you can stay very, very well protected, because that person cannot be made ever to disclose who you are.
You've been quoted as saying that, I believe this is a direct quote, we have an amoral civil service in Canada. What did you mean when you said that?
It's a civil service that has no morality whatsoever. And this is something that is uniquely problematic about Canada. The Americans, for instance, don't have this problem. Let me give you an example. When the U.S. military and the CIA were involved in torturing persons, you know, the Guantanamo Bay business, waterboarding, secret prison.
Right.
Exactly. When that was going on, a lot of people thought, we shouldn't be torturing. This is terribly wrong. And how did the news get out to the press? Employees of the CIA itself leaked it. The persons in the agency that was doing it said, this isn't right. This is a disgrace to our national values. And they leaked it to the press. So did certain persons in the U.S. military. So you had the military and the CIA, while carrying out these activities, also spawning enough ethical individuals who blew the whistle on it. Nothing of that kind happens in Canada.
What do you think accounts for the difference?
I think it's cultural. I mean, it's got to be said, and I know it will cause great offense, but it's got to be said that our civil service is a less ethical one than the American one. And that is something that perhaps is entwined with Canadians' greater belief in government. Of course, Americans don't trust government as far as they can throw it. We tend to trust it more. Well, that's a mistake when it gets to the case of Mr. Brouillet. His medical files, very intimate details of his psychiatric record, were shared with hundreds, not tens, hundreds of bureaucrats and the minister in the Department of Veterans Affairs. That's something that should never happen.
Let's listen into another perspective. This is a former longtime civil servant, Mel Kapp. He's the president of the Institute for Research into Public Policy. He's also a former head of the Privy Council. That is a top job in the civil service. Here are his thoughts on when it may be appropriate to leak information to the public.
The only circumstance I can ever envisage when it is legitimate to actually leak something is when you have evidence that the Prime Minister, the Minister of Public Safety, the Attorney General, and the Governor General are all conspiring in conjunction with the Commissioner of the RCM Police to break the law. And if you had something like that, I could understand going public to the media. Short of that, there is always a place to take your complaint. There's always a way of dealing with. The system has built-in regulators and venues by which you can take your complaint to somebody who will deal with it.
That's Mel Kapp, the former head of the Privy Council. And Aaron, what is your reaction to his comments on the bar there?
Well, he's just not very knowledgeable. He's wrong. I mean, the Supreme Court of Canada, and I'm speaking about the law, I'm not speaking about my opinion here, has said that civil servants owe a duty to the government of Canada, but not the elected government of the day. Let me put this in other terms. Civil servants owe a duty to the Crown. They don't owe it to the Harper government or any other government. And consequently, when something is being done wrong against the Crown, it is permissible to go public. The Supreme Court of Canada has said this unanimously, clearly, and it's codified in the Public Service Disclosure Protection Act. So as a matter of law, Mr. Kapp is just plain wrong. There's no way around it. Now, what is important to note is you cannot blow the whistle for just anything. There has to be a reason. It has to be, for instance, fiscal impropriety, breaking of the law, endangerment to a person's health or safety, and there are a few other categories besides. I would never recommend anyone do this unaided.
Right. Let's bring in someone else in the conversation, too, if I can, Mr. Adoran. Ralph Heinzman has held many top jobs in the federal civil service. Among other things, he helped draft a values and ethics code for the public service. He is also an adjunct professor in the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa and a senior fellow at Massey College at the University of Toronto. He's in Ottawa this morning, too. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's talk about what the bar that Mel Kapp is setting for when it is okay in his mind to leak information to the public. What do you think of that?
Well, I think on that, Amir is perhaps closer to the truth than my friend Mel. There are very clearly, in law, legitimate recourse to public whistleblowing, and the jurisprudence has set that out, and even the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act has made reference to it, and indeed even protects it in certain circumstances. So there is clearly a legitimate recourse to public whistleblowing, but it's not an unrestricted right. It's not the default position. The courts have clearly defined circumstances in which it can be used, because all employees, and this doesn't apply just to the public sector, all employees, whether in the private or the public sector, owe a duty of loyalty to their employers. That's the default position. Freedom of expression has to be balanced by the duty of loyalty. And so public whistleblowing can only be legitimately used when the duty of loyalty has been fully exercised, fully observed. And I would say that now includes the duty to use the mechanisms, and this is where I think Mel is right, to use the internal disclosure mechanisms that are available at different levels, including the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner, and that public whistleblowing could only be legitimate, and it is legitimate, the law says so, after these have been exhausted.
How surprised are you that this kind of behavior that the Privacy Commissioner identified with the Veterans Affairs Department was kept secret?
I think there are a variety of... what I'm disappointed is that there weren't more public servants who recognized, who were alert to, who were sensitive to the fact that something was going on that ought not to have been going on. Mm-hmm. And you didn't need public whistleblowing for that. You simply needed one or two public servants to say, hey, look, we shouldn't be doing this.
It should stop here.
That's right.
Right.
So that's the disappointment for me. But I think that points to the fact that the public service at the moment is not investing enough in training and awareness related to public service values and ethics. The Treasury Board Secretariat's investment and activity in this area has been declining radically over the past few years, and I think it's time for the government to wake up and to begin to reinvest in the awareness of public servants about their duties.
I'd like to listen to a clip now from Michelle Drapeau.